Good evening, YouTube. My name is Darth Cohen, 2020 SWGOH. Carl Cohen, to those of you that do not know. Tonight, I want to talk about how I, a 32-year-old constant reader, became a fan of the most notorious author of the last 1,000 years. I am talking about Stephen King, the greatest author of all time. Our story begins, take this damn hat off. Whoop. Our story begins, excuse me for my hair. It begins when I was about, I'd say, 2 years of age. My mom, my late great mother, her name was Pamela Cohen, by the way. She had every King book you can imagine. Everything from Cujo to Carrie to Firestarter to Pet Sematary to Thinner, Maximum Overdrive, Cycle of the Werewolf, The Shining, all that shit. She had it all. And you know what? She used to read them. So one day, she thought it would be a good idea, to expose me to Stephen King. My dad, of course, had reservations about it, as all fathers do. But you know what? As a little kid, I was just like, how bad can King be? He's not that scary. That was my first thought. She would pick the scariest parts of each and every book that he wrote, and she would read them to me. She went through them all. But one day, when I was about 2.5, 3 years old, my memory's about as sharp as a stick. She was reading me Cujo, some of the scarier parts with the dog when Donna and Tad are trapped in that Pinto. And she noticed that the book was starting to bother me a little bit. So you know what she did? She flipped back to the beginning of the book and started reading me the book. Now what I can remember about the book was, little did I realize at the time that was going to turn me into the Stephen King fan I am today. Look, I'm even wearing my Cujo dog treat shirt for this video. Aw. All Cujo wanted to be was a good boy. He didn't want to succumb to rabies. He didn't want to kill anyone. That was the first book she ever read to me all the way through, and little did I realize that would turn me into this King fan that I am today. Stephen King is a great author. He writes great books. He writes books that make you feel uncomfortable. He writes great characters, great protagonists, great villains. He writes very good overbearing parents like Margaret White and Carrie. She's the true villain in that book. I won't go into any further details than that. Now, you might be asking, how many of King's books have you actually read? Well, let's go down the list. Cujo, Carrie, Firestarter, Christine, The Shining. I have read Salem's Lot. I have read Tommyknockers, which is one of the most messed up books I think I will ever read in my life. And everybody says, but Carl, you've read all those other books. How can you say Tommyknockers is messed up? And I was just like, you want to know how I know Tommyknockers is messed up? I ain't going to say why it's messed up. Why don't you read it yourself and you'll find out why. That's my encouragement. Go ahead and read. People often ask me, if I'm going to read Stephen King, where should I start? And I was like, where should you start? Well, here's what I recommend. Start with a book that's going to make you... What scares you? Do rabid dogs scare you? If that's the case, start with Cujo. Do clowns scare you? If that's the case, start with It. If the idea of burying someone in a Indian graveyard beyond a Pet Sematary scares you, then read Pet Sematary. Whatever scares you, that's the book you need to start with. Now, me personally, I am currently rereading Pet Sematary, and I am telling you, that book is messed up. It's a great story, but it's dark. Stephen King writes a lot of great stories, like I said, My mom had them all. She read me parts of Salem's Lot. I've read The Stand, which is kind of like I can't talk about the dreaded thing that will get me demonetized here on YouTube. We survived that, didn't we, folks? Stephen King writes about a similar incident in The Stand. He calls it Captain Trips. There are so many characters in that book, you can't keep up with them. You see, he wrote The Dead Zone. I haven't read The Dead Zone yet. I'm looking forward to reading that one. I have not read the Dark Tower series yet. I've heard that the Dark Tower is a letdown. That's what I've heard from other YouTubers. Now, here's the thing. If you're going to read Stephen King, here's my biggest advice to you. Take it one page at a time. Immerse yourself in the environment that you're reading about. For example, if you're reading Cujo, immerse yourself in the environment. You're not going to like all the characters, I promise you that. But when you read a book like Cujo, he writes it so well that you will feel when you read a book like Cujo, for example, and you're reading a part with the dog, as the dog goes into madness, as it's going feral, as Cujo goes more and more feral to the point where he's actually rabid and wild, and he no longer is a good boy. As this dog goes into going feral, you will read through the dog's perspective. These people are responsible for causing this. I have to end them. Stephen King does a great job of making you feel uncomfortable, and that's why I like the author. Cycle of the Werewolf, another book I just read. It's a novella. If you've seen the movie Silver Bullet, you know what that movie is based off of. I have read The Shining, too. The Shining is a psychological thriller on steroids. I mean, the way that book is written, every Stephen King book is written in a unique way. I became a fan of Stephen King. When I was in second grade, my mom decided one day, we were at a bookstore in Florida, right? While in this bookstore, I remember this very clearly, while we were in this bookstore, my dad's like, my dad's like, Pam, what the hell are you doing with Carl? And she's just like, I'm going to get him his own copy of Cujo. And it was paperback, and it was back in like 2000 and crap, when was I in second grade? 2001 or 2, somewhere around there. And I will tell you, that was the best decision she ever made. Of course, me being the kid that I was, I started reading it, and oh man, that book gave me chills. I just skipped right to the scary stuff. I didn't care about the family drama or anything. And I was reading it in second grade. But then, when I read it as a teenager, that's when the book started speaking to me a little louder. I read It, The Stand, Cujo, Pet Sematary. I read all of the King books when I was at Dixie Heights. That's the high school I went to in Edgewood, Kentucky. They had all the Stephen King books. And let me tell you something. I read them all. I didn't read the Dark Tower. They had those, but I didn't read them. I didn't get around to them before I graduated. But here's the thing. When I read them as a teenager, the book started to speak to me a lot louder. Because I was a teenager, but I understood more of it. Fast forward to now as an adult, and those books are starting to speak to me even louder. Because Cujo, I mean, Stephen King, some of those books that he writes are super dark. But that's what makes them great stories. Because everyone is so skeptical about Stephen King and everything because they think that, oh, he's messed up in the head because he writes horror stories. It's the fact that he writes horror stories that makes him the master of horror. He says he writes suspense novels. Suspense novels, yes, but let me tell you something. Every one of his stories has a unique underline to them. If you read Pet Sematary, that book is dark throughout. There is a character in that book, Zelda, that will give you nightmares. If you read Cujo, that book will give you nightmares the first time you read it. If you read Cycle of the Werewolf before you watch Silver Bullet will make more sense to you if you read it beforehand. If you read Christine, the sense of a car taking over somebody's life, and a car that can self-repair itself, that's scary. That's psychological. That is what makes Stephen King such a great author, folks. That is why I recommend you read his books. You can read them in any order you want. I haven't gotten around to all of his books yet. I'm still working on getting some Stephen Bachman stuff and all that stuff. I'm going to be listening to an audio short story called The Library Policeman here very soon. It's on Autobook. Don't worry, I'll get the short story book 4 past midnight. I'll get that myself and I will read it. And you better believe that when I read that, that's going to be a messed up story. Some of the Stephen King books that I've read have been turned into adaptations. Now, I got this Cujo shirt for a couple of reasons. First of all, I like the 83 adaptation. I was 3 years old the first time I watched that, and that just further opened my mind to Stephen King. He's a great author, and everyone asked me, who's your least favorite character in Cujo? And I was like, my least favorite character? It's a toss-up between Gary Purvier and Joe Camber. Because they both end up meeting a grisly fate in that book. And I'm not going into any further detail than that. They are redoing Cujo on Netflix. I don't know when it's going to drop, but I know it's going to happen. So that's why I have this shirt. Cujo's Dog Treats since 1983. All natural flesh flavor. So, let me know in the comments below if you've read Stephen King. If you're planning on reading Stephen King, and let me know also where you want to start reading Stephen King, and I will respond to the comments as best I can. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.